Well, happy Monday here, everyone. Monday, August 7th. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Coming off a little slow moving today, coming off. Dorothy and I celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary last night, but still going strong here. Appreciate it. We have Andy Murray hopping in here. Jason, under the weather today, probably due to the Ticats performance. Andy will make that joke here. And we have the now a new nickname here. We have the professor, Andrew Murray, and now we have the director here, Evan Willsmore. Evan, we can probably get into that more once Andy hops off the stream later, but how are you doing? Congratulations, Evan, first and foremost.
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. It was an exciting weekend of football here. Obviously, we've got plenty of things to talk about, me personally and this slate of games. But yeah, man, ultimately I was impressed. Maybe it was a bit of a slower week. You had some blowouts, you had some closer games, but honestly, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to get into this week. I'm excited.
Yeah, Evan announcing over the weekend that he's now the assistant director of player personnel for the Vegas Nighthawks here of the IFL. Very exciting. Andy hopping on here last minute this morning. Andy, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I love swooping in and just, stealing other people's thunder. I hope Jason gets better, but I am always happy to fly in last moment. But as far as Evan goes, congratulations, sir. That is a fantastic honor. Great distinction. I have no doubt you're going to absolutely rock it when you do that. I'm really excited for you. Very stoked. I know we've talked a little bit about your involvement as far as like scouting and all the work that you put in. You have impressed me from day one since I met you with all the work that you put in. So I absolutely cannot wait to see what you do with them and the new role that you have. So congratulations, sir.
I appreciate it, man. That means a lot, really.
Yeah, it's cool. Just we've seen Jay here, right? Come from the new sub family, go to work with the Brahmas here, and obviously Evan. Like I just like, because some of I just kind of do this for fun, right? Have my own thing that I do, but it's cool to see guys that are passionate about this, right, and work, and Evan earning this and kind of really. Stepping into this role, where years ago, like, what are we going to do? And you're still so young, but it's cool to see this, working towards something. We can talk more about that. We have James here checking in Monday Markcast. Let's go. And then we have Jeff here. He says, yeah, first time tuning in live. Usually listens to Rod. I guess Rod Peterson's off today. So, like and subscribe. If you're here, I have some newsy stuff to fill. We can talk about, the Darnell Sankey and everything going to the XFL. Do we want to do that at the top or at the bottom? Do you guys want to talk on that now, or do you want to do the games first?
Well, I think we have to talk about it now.
Yeah, okay. It's going to cross-pollinate.
All right, so we had over the weekend Darnell Sankey, right, going back up. He said he's leaving the XFL, going back up to the CFL. I'll pull up the tweet. Evan, thoughts on this? You covered him as part of the Renegades and everything else. Let me get the tweet up.
Yeah, I mean, I had followed Sankey's story a bit. Him and Cam Kelly came down too from Hamilton to San Antonio. Not a lot of people talked about that. Sankey was definitely the big CFL acquisition. And I remember last year when people were kind of up in arms, at least the CFL community was about that, Sankey leaving and going to an American league. And I haven't read. I mean, look, we're going to get into this. I kind of skimmed over that article. I didn't really read it fully. So, I'm interested to see his true opinion. But, ultimately, I can't blame him for this. And I honestly think, as much as I, maybe I'm pro XFL or whatever, I think Sankey, I mean, he had a great run there in Saskatchewan. And, if he can go back there, go to another team or whatever. I mean, look, he did his job in Arlington. He won the championship. Like, he kind of hit the pinnacle there, I think you'd say. So now he can go back to Canada and just kind of resume his career the way things were. Plus, there's also that familiarity aspect there. He came into the XFL not knowing anything, not really knowing anybody, but now he has the opportunity to go back to a place where he has, all these established connections. The fans probably have a better idea of who he is, because let's be honest, like, the average American fan isn't going to know who Darnell Sankey is, NFL or XFL, USFL, whatever. I mean, unless you're a fan of the college he went to, which I'd have to check on what that actually is. But anyway, ultimately, I think, this is probably a good move for Sankey. And honestly, it gets him back on the field sooner. I mean, if he signs, during this season, I mean, we just wrapped up, week 9, he'd still have so many weeks to perform and have an opportunity to win another championship. And then you get into the story of, how cool would it be for, him to win a championship in the United States in May, go back to Canada, and then have a chance, maybe win another one in November, which you and me will be there for, Reed, possibly.
Yeah, I just didn't like Andy. Let's get your thoughts because I got a little piece.
Look, I don't blame him for taking the risk to go down south and play in another league. We've seen that with several players. Namely, we had him. We obviously had McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who went south and played the USFL. Until further notice, he's still trying to get into the NFL. It doesn't seem like he's going back to Canada anytime soon, despite how badly people tried to will that into existence after Ottawa's quarterback injury peril that they went through for a couple weeks. So, look, all the power to say Mr. Sankey. I think he explored an option. It didn't really work out for him personally, and he decided to come back. I read the article in full, and let me tell you, the tone of it does not match really what people make it out to be as far as reading the headline. I think the main point that Sankey was getting at was that he personally did not find what he was looking for in the league that he played for. But if you go and look at some of the quotes in the article and some of the pieces that were pulled out, he clearly recognizes the viability of something like an XFL. And he said it himself, basically, that the level of competition was pretty much almost equal in terms of, this quote right here, the competition level was very equal in that matter. And so I think for him, like, it's an important comparison to make, of course. And if he seems like he loved his time in the CFL so much that he wanted to go back to it. And a lot of people who've said that they have established themselves in the CFL do hold it in high regard. And, it's a league that's been around for so long. The XFL is, in a lot of ways, it's still an experiment. He makes that point as well. Like, there's still a lot of things that they are figuring out. He said, he mentioned that the travel aspect and the hub thing was a little bit weird for him and some of the players in terms of like going back and forth between the home cities, playing in the homes, and then going back to Arlington. But, that's what comes with this whole thing with trying to start up the league again. But overall, the tone, it seems to me, is that it just, to me, read as to each their own. Like, it didn't work out for him specifically for certain reasons, but he's not dogging it and saying that it can't work ever or that it's inferior in any way, shape, or form. But other people want to take that context out of that article. That's all on them, because I do not get that sense at all reading that article.
Yeah, that's just my piece. And, we've had Hodge on, and I love 3 Down for what they do. I just wish they weren't so like, see, he said something bad about the XFL here. We can, he wants to come back. Like, we had the quote, like, Andy said, I would argue that in terms of competition level, I think it's pretty much the same. I said, that's a lot less sexy quote than like, the XFL just wasn't for me. That's fine. And I have argued on here for the last, year and a half now that we've seen this new XFL. I think it relies way too much on like, we want this to be so, a platform for players, as opposed to like, we want you to be able to work here for 5, 6, 7 years and earn a paycheck. And I think that's kind of worked out now. But, I did see where was the quote, and, Andy, of course, ballsy chiming in. I could have told him that before he left. And I said, why? Why would that be? Why would that be? He came to the South. He made, $55,000+ worked 12 weeks. Won a championship, and now he's back up, and he's probably going to be able to jump on the team and make, like Andy said, another deep run here. Like, what was so bad about him, even, God forbid, thinking about going south and playing in the XFL? I don't get this tribalism. I mean, I know Ballsy like works for the Riders, so I think he's got a little bit more skin, but like 3 Down, I think 3 Down is a little too tribal for their own good sometimes when it comes to like, well, this is, we got to protect this, and, God forbid anyone speak ill about the CFL. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Do you guys have anything else on that before we want to get to the games?
Well, I mean, I decided to put some of those specific quotes in his points, in his post there, because I just wanted to sort of illuminate how Sankey was really spinning it versus how other people would spin it. So I just wanted to make that clear as far as, look, I just want to make sure he's doing his homework. I got to make sure you read the article, as we always say, we keep hanging on about that. So I think that's a really important part to consider. And just, like, again, they're all different leagues. They have their different mindsets. I watched the IFL championship game on Saturday. I'll be honest, I have not really watched a lot of IFL. And so for me, it was a good experience just for me to get more acclimated to other players who potentially, who knows, might make their way to the XFL or some of these other leagues, and to sort of be more familiar with the style of the game. I mean, we have, as our comrade Sam Shady will tell you, there's a bajillion different arena iterations out there. So it seems to me like it's important to get familiar with some of the bigger higher end ones like IFL, which I mean, it was on CBS Sports Network. It was on a decently syndicated feed there on Saturday. So for me, like, I enjoy all of it. I don't really care for tribalism. I've said that from day one. I really don't. You know, I'll make my points and I'll say what I want to about all these leagues, but I really don't care for all the pitchforks and the fire.
Yeah, so let's get into this. We have, kind of an interesting slate of games here. As previously mentioned, out last night, watched the other ones over the weekend here. Andy up in arms about this Ottawa, Saskatchewan. I saw lots of coaching, miscues and everything. Evan, initial thoughts on this, and I have some tweets I can pull up as well.
Yeah, so the game last night, right? Yeah, Ottawa, Saskatchewan. So it's interesting because I didn't mention this one last week as a game to watch. My game that I was really talking about was BC and Winnipeg, which yeah, sorry, Reed. I know we have to get to that later. It's unfortunate, but anyway, yeah. So the Saskatchewan Ottawa game, this to me, I really thought Ottawa was going to win this game, just given the way that Saskatchewan's been playing lately. I didn't think they had things figured out. And there were some, questionable decision making in this game for sure. Maybe we can get to that later. But, again, this felt winnable for Ottawa. And now it kind of feels like, there was all this hype a couple weeks ago, Dustin Crum, everybody coming in. But now it's kind of fading away again. And especially in this game, I felt like, if Ottawa doesn't win this one, they're kind of right back to that, point of, I don't want to say concern or alarm, but they need to do something again, right? They got to pick things up, get things going. But ultimately this was a good win for Saskatchewan, and it put some, Calgary won against Toronto this week, which was surprising, but for different reasons. Another game we'll get into. Yeah. But Saskatchewan with this win, I think, is kind of really put themselves, at 4-4, they really do kind of control their own destiny. There's many ways, in my opinion, this could go. They could lose. I haven't looked at their schedule. They could lose another, 3 games in a row, or they could win another 3 games in a row. And then, then we'll have a really good idea of where they're at. Because to be honest, even last week, I didn't really know where Saskatchewan was, what they were doing, where they were going to go. I had a lot of questions, and some of them I think were answered this week in this win for sure.
Andy, what do you make here? I've seen a lot of, we're calling for the Mason Fines of it all. What did you make of Saskatchewan win here late?
Listen, man, this all goes on the coaches in this game. This was abominable. I'll get into the players in a second, but I need to talk about the coaching decisions in this game for a second. This fourth quarter was maddening. As a football fan, it was absolutely maddening to watch. So Ottawa offensively really was not doing much this entire game. And I think people have figured out Dustin Crum to a degree, and his passing numbers have been low. He was sacked 6 times. Ottawa didn't get any sacks whatsoever. So their ability to protect him, or his ability to just sort of throw the ball away, is something he needs to develop if they're going to be able to move the ball consistently. They were pretty pedestrian on offense overall. But as far as some of the decisions that were made in the fourth quarter, Ottawa was driving down the field. They had this long, sustained drive in the fourth quarter, and it looked like they were going to take the lead. They were down 23-21, and they get to around the 30-yard line, and it's about a 2nd and 2, and they decide that they're going to throw a deep pass to see if they get a big play or a touchdown. It doesn't happen. It falls incomplete. This is Tyler Pigrome, by the way. Tyler Pigrome is in because they were going to fake running short yardage. Mind you, it's 2nd and 2. In the CFL, everyone plays a yard off the ball, so getting a 3rd and 1 or 2nd and 1 is almost automatic, right? Well, it's 2nd and 2. Now it's 3rd and 2. They decide to run a sneak with Pigrome on the next play. They don't get it, so they get no points. Mind you, they could have kicked a field goal and they could have gone up at that point. They would have been up 24-23. So there you already have a pretty questionable decision by Coach Bob Dice. Later on, Saskatchewan, in their own territory, decide, instead of punting the ball away to an offense that really hasn't done much all day. Look, you can argue all you want about execution and process. Some people would argue that the process was correct. I disagree. If the other offense, Patrick Mahomes is not on the other side of the field. Do you really fear that they're going to move the ball that much? I would have taken my chances and said, let's see you move the ball again, Crum. And I think in that case, Saskatchewan made a horrendous error. They went for it on 3rd and 1 in their own territory. They didn't get it. Now they've given a clear opportunity for Ottawa. Ottawa takes the ball to get all the way down to the 1 yard line, and they don't make it on second down. They get down.
Yeah, so I had
This is when they get down to the 1 yard line, and instead of going forward and getting a touchdown or just giving themselves giving Saskatchewan a really long field to potentially get the ball back, they go for the field goal, and it's like, okay, well, you're up now, but now you've given too much time to Saskatchewan. And then on top of all of this, after all these decisions, they decide that it would be best for them to kick off to Mario Alford, who, in my opinion, is basically the Devin Hester of this league. He is dangerous. Do not let him have the ball. Like, do not let him have any free reign, free kick, any sort of space to work with. And they kick it right to him, and he gets it near midfield and possibly could have broken it even further. And then they kick that long field goal and take the lead and win. Bob Dice, look, afterwards I said he needs to apologize to the team for what he did. Well, he apologized not for the field goal decision. He apologized for kicking it to Alford on the side of the field. I think he should apologize for all of it. He made 3 really horrible decisions in the fourth quarter that cost his team. I think that this was just a really bad breakdown in coaching this entire quarter, and it really was maddening to watch as a football fan, because I think that it did a disservice to the players in a lot of ways. So no, I look, overall, I like Bob Dice, but he let his team down here. He was not good in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, well, and it's really the first time we've kind of seen him collapse like that. That's why I just I had this 3 down thing. Like, see, like only we can poo-poo the CFL. See, fans deserve only 3 down can we can criticize, but otherwise it's not very good. Evan, what did you make of this breakdown? Because I had a lot of tweet saves kind of calling for both Dickinson and Bob Dice's heads here.
Yeah, it's a weird ending. And every time I see a team, get extremely confident about kicking one of those, field goals with like over a minute left, I'm just like, no, I think in the moment, there's certain people who forget that, like, it's not that hard. Like, if unless it's a field goal, like, let's say if it was, 20, like, I don't know, if that was a field goal, like if Saskatchewan was to tie the game instead of win it on the field goal, I would get why Ottawa would take a field goal there. But the fact that they knew that if Saskatchewan got in the field goal range and kicked it, that would win them the game, like, that doesn't make any sense. I get a field goal is a safer option, but like they were right there. Like, even if you don't get the touchdown, then you have to drive all the way down the field. And like Andy said, that avoids the whole situation with Mario Alford. You don't even have to worry about him because it just turns over on down. So yeah, I agree. It was definitely a weird ending. And I think in the moment, again, people just get too confident. They think we're just going to kick this field goal and it's all about the defense. The defense are going to stop. Well, it's not really about the defense getting a stop if the returner takes it halfway up the field and then you've already eliminated half the field. Like, the defense can only do so much in that situation. Like, they have nothing to do with Mario Alford because that's a special teams play. So yeah, I don't know. Definitely a weird ending. And I agree. I think, Bob Dice should have taken a bit more credibility. Now, the fact that he apologized at all really does say something, because you'll get a lot of coaches that, will just keep pounding the table. No, I'm right. You're wrong. Like, we thought this through. That was not thought through, in my opinion. That was just a weird way to finish a game. And to be honest, like, it's great to see a team win on a field goal. Like, that's obviously one of the more exciting ways to, finish a game. But it doesn't feel as good when you knew that the other team made a silly mistake and they could have just had the win right then and there.
Yeah, I don't know if that last minute in the CFL game just lasts forever. I mean, if you can make completions, and there's the whole debate about the 3 downs, and you miss one, you're trying to maintain momentum going down the field. But if you can get those little completion, those little short little out, whatever route thing, you can go the whole length of the field. And so this debate about that, I had a quote here, not to make this the Michael Ball show here, but Andy, is Mason Fine the best quarterback too in the like, he is so high on Mason Fine right now. I do feel like it's just this Saskatchewan homerism, right? And I saw that right we see with I love Rob Van Stone, but a lot of the Cody Fajardos last year, like, a lot of, we got to defend our quarterback here. What do you make of Mason Fine? 4-4 Roughriders with Harris out.
Well, if he thinks 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions qualifies for QB2, then I'm really worried about the health of the rest of the league. That's all I'm going to say, because I don't think Mason Fine's got it. I would call him Mason Fine, Mason okay, Mason whatever, because I don't really care, because he is average. We've seen it. We understand who he is right now. This is who he is. against a better matchup in Ottawa, which wasn't, the same level of defense that he saw against BC and Toronto. He still looked fine, but again, he just wasn't spectacular. I think this is who he is, and this is what he is. He's not the best second quarterback in the league, okay? I'll take Dane Evans over here any day of the week. I know that's saying a lot. I get what we just saw this past weekend, but I would still take Dane Evans in a lot of cases. There's a lot of better quarterback twos than Mason Fine. Sorry, Mr. Ballsy. You're going to have to take a hike on this one. Go find someone else. Where's Dolegala? Like, I want to see more of Dolegala, too. I'd rather see more of him getting burned than Mason Fine because I don't think there's really much mystery left here. I think Dolegala is somebody that needs to see more of the field and have more opportunities. If the Riders, look, I don't know if it's a survival game for them at this point. They've been some crazy games this year. Also, that Calgary game, they almost came back in at home and then lost ultimately on the long field goal. I mean, they're kind of living on the edge here. They got to be careful because them and the Stampeders are going to be sort of knifing each other until the finish line to see which one gets in. I mean, this bottom tier of the playoffs, it's looking grisly, man. Like I said to everyone on the chat, I think on Friday night or Thursday night, I said, look, it's Argos, it's Bombers, and Lions, and everybody else is just like basically in a giant tussle in a ditch somewhere trying to get out of it. And I think this is really, there's not really much to write home for Saskatchewan. They have a decent enough defense, decent enough special teams. Their offense, it's uninspired.
Evan, how did our boy Crumb Sanity do here? Like you said, figuring him out. Is the mystery gone? Right, they lost last week as well near the end of the game.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it started last week really, and I was hoping maybe this week, you kind of swing that momentum back, but no, I think teams are starting to figure out, his game plan, and he had a peak, but that peak again is gone, and I think I don't want to say it's gone with the rest of the team because I still have hope. I still have belief. But I do want to talk about some other players in this game, transitioning off of,
Yep.
We already talked about Mason Fine a bit. I agree with everything Andy said. I mean, if you think Mason Fine is the best QB2 in the league, oh boy, I don't know. I mean, either you're a really big Saskatchewan fan or you just haven't watched enough CFL football. And look, Mason Fine at this point, I think this is his third year in the league. It's nothing against him. It's just, he has this performance was better. This was definitely his best performance as the starter. But the past couple weeks, it was hard to watch him. And I think it was maybe last week or the week before I was saying, one of the weirdest quarterback performances I'd ever seen from a guy. And that's not necessarily a good thing, or I didn't really mean it in a good way. But I agree with everything Andy said. The two things, I would take Dane Evans over him any day. And what about Jake Dolegala? Because he actually looked good in the touchdown Atlantic game. So don't know what happened to that. But the one guy I really want to talk about here, at least on the Saskatchewan side, is Jareth Stearns. Now, a lot of people don't know that Jareth Stearns actually signed in the CFL, and he was a really big XFL target. I remember Max was singing his praises a while back during the XFL draft. But yeah, Jareth Stearns, signed recently with Saskatchewan, during the season a couple weeks ago. I don't remember which week it was, but signed up there. And this was the first game where I think he really saw action, and, he led the team in catches. It looks like they kind of got a steal here. And, I was pushing for Stearns to be signed, during the XFL season with a couple teams, and that was probably the top receiver on my list. So good to see him up in the CFL. Definitely not where I thought I'd be watching him play, but at least he's kind of kickstarting his pro career. He was with the Bucks for a bit and then with the Rams last season. And then just looking on the Ottawa side, I think there was somebody here I was going to talk about. Maybe not. Maybe I was looking at Saskatchewan. Maybe I was going to talk about Sean Bain because he had another nice game, and I've really liked his progression this season. But outside of that, I think I just really wanted to talk about Jareth Stearns because everybody knows how much I love Jareth Stearns.
Andy, what do you make? I don't know. I think I talked about this. I was like, 4-4 Riders. I don't know what to make of this team. It doesn't feel like they have any identity. I know the Trevor Harris thing really pulled for it. I worry here, 2 seasons kind of back to back missing the playoffs. What do you make of this team overall?
Like I said, I think their defense is commendable, and they get a lot of pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks. Like I said, they got 6 sacks in this game, and they really caused hell for Justin Crum. Their pass defense was pretty good. They only gave up 174 passing yards. And overall, I mean, you give up 222 total on defense is pretty good. You're doing your job. The only things that really kept him in was turnovers on offense and just this inability to really understand situational football. Like again, with Dickinson deciding that he was going to go for it in his own territory, it just was a disservice to that defense. And they still held their ground, and they managed to keep Ottawa out of the end zone somehow. And and that's the biggest thing. Ottawa had 3 chances inside the red zone. They didn't convert any of them for touchdowns. So they clearly have been able to stand up tall against some formidable situations. I mean, they did a good job against the Argos last week, actually. I really have to say they managed to keep Chad Kelly in check, and that was a really big deal for them again in Touchdown Atlantic. It's just at some point it just fell apart for them on the other units. But for their offense, again, it's kind of a shame that their receivers don't get more burn, because I really like the receiving core. It may not be like the top end in the league, but I really like some of these guys. Sean Bain has been excellent. Samuel Emelis has a great skill set. I just love the way that he comes out of his breaks when he catches the ball. I like Jake Winicky. I mean, he was really nice in Montreal. Really good third option there. I like their receiving core a lot. And Jamal Morrow is a solid back. He's a solid CFL running back. But it just doesn't feel like they can really get a lot of this to mesh. Their offensive line obviously is still, it's in flux because of some of the injuries and some of the early retirements that they had. Jason Labatt retiring 2 years ago after COVID because they hadn't played for over a year. And a couple of other guys that they had. Brandon Labatt, the guy who their tackle who retired from the team. And so I think it's unfortunate because they just have a lot of skill position players that I really like, but they just don't have the consistency. They just don't have the quarterback. They haven't had the quarterback. Fajardo, we know, just famously did not pan out after last year. He just at some point just broke down, and he couldn't really do it anymore for Saskatchewan. I think that's where it all stems from. And again, with the coaching decisions, I mean, Dickinson's had some really questionable decisions in some of these games, especially in that BC game as well. So I don't know. I just don't trust them. But in a game of survival, I mean, they might be able to just kind of etch their way into a playoff spot. That's really what they're trying to do. But as far as contenders go, no, they don't really have any staying power as far as making a run or having anything that they can do in the playoffs.
But even when you talk here, and we'll get off of this game because we got to get trucking here on the couple other ones here. Even when you look at this receiving core, and like you said, it's fine. But I mean, look at BC's receiving core. Look at Winnipeg. Look at Toronto. This is fine. This is a finely built team. You have Mason Fine as a quarterback. I don't see anything spectacular. Yeah, Sean Bain's really good, right? When he gets the ball, but you don't have a quarterback that can elevate any of these receivers. We've seen Edmonton try to elevate the quarterback with better receivers. I just don't see anything here meshing at all. I think that there's going to be a lot of turnover here in the offseason. We already saw that, going into this season, and I think it's going to go even further up and down. But I don't see anything exciting. If I'm a Saskatchewan fan, I don't feel excited about this win. I don't feel excited about beating Ottawa. Like, oh, the game came down to the end again. Like, it's exciting, kind of this whole CFL thing. I don't know. I just feel like there's not a lot of faith I would have in Saskatchewan and kind of the leadership there if I'm a fan. Evan, do you have anything else on this? We'll get to the what do we got? The Ticats game. Evan, no? Nothing else?
No.
All right, so let's get over to this. I watched this. I was out, or I had weddings both Friday, Saturday. So I watched this on the CBS Sports Network on demand, or not demand, like record here. Cody Fajardo here, faltering at the beginning, like Andy said, kind of having his best Bo Levi Mitchell impression here, coming back, winning, really rough first half for Cody, coming back, Hamilton kind of falling apart. I have some notes. We'll go to Evan first. What did you make of Taylor Powell, everything else with the Ticats? And like I said, maybe this is why Jason's out today.
Yeah, definitely. I thought Hamilton might sneak away with a win here. I was a strong believer in Taylor Powell, and James Butler had a pretty nice game, even if it was on limited carries, a big game in the receiving department. But yeah, I don't know. It was just a really, first half, like Hamilton looked like they had some momentum, and then Montreal just like exploded in the fourth quarter and, took the thing, like right out of Hamilton's hands. And that was it. That was all she wrote. So I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know. Hamilton is just in a, you know, I mean, I know they've been in a rebuilding spot for a bit. I think that's safe to say. It doesn't help that the quarterback that they brought in to be the franchise guy has only played in, so many games. Like even Matt Schultz looked better than him before he got injured, right? I'm talking about Bo Levi Mitchell. Now you have Taylor Powell. Similar situation here to like Dustin Crum, a guy who's never played before coming in and is asked to start multiple games. Now, I don't know what the timeline is for what's his name, Schultz, but I expected, I can't say I expected a bit more from Taylor Powell because he's only played in so many games, but this was, I don't know, this left definitely some things to be desired. Now, look, threw for 200 yards, great. Completed 20 passes, great. Like it wasn't all bad, but to be honest, like I might, I would take Cody's performance over him in this game, despite that first half. But let me just get into some of the players here because that's where I really shine, and I'll quit rambling on about things that I don't 100% know about. But so if I look at Will Stanback, whatever. We had talked about him last week as finally kind of coming on, and I think he had 80 something yards last week, or whatever. And now he had a 100-yard game. First time in forever that I can remember he's had a 100-yard game. Didn't score, but averaged 5.6. So, good for him. It's really nice to see him finally get going because, 2 years ago, this guy, in my opinion, was one of the better all-around players in the CFL, not just at the running back position, but I was a big Will Stanback fan, and I still am. Nothing against him. Austin Mack, how many times have I said his name on this show before? Continuing to shine, being at the top of the, receiving leaderboard. Tyler Snead, no one's really talked about him a ton, but he's kind of come on in recent weeks. Him and Courtney Davis are starting to have larger roles. I don't think Keon Julian Grant played in this game. I believe, was he on the 6th game? I don't know, but
I think he's out. Yeah.
Yeah, I know he's out. I read something about that, but I can't exactly remember it. But yeah, and then Tyson Philpott coming back. I think that was a big, addition. And you talk about, I'd said many times before, Montreal lost so many receivers, but now it's almost like they have not more that they can handle, but they just have so many guys that they can go to. And I don't think it's necessarily like on the same level as BC, obviously, just because a lot of these guys aren't as experienced. But Tyson Philpott coming back, he had 4 catches, and then I'm still waiting to see what happens to Greg Ellingson, because that was the other guy that we had mentioned for a while. And I get he's a veteran now, so probably going to have a limited role one way or another. But, I love Greg. He's a great guy, and I've had an opportunity to talk to him before. So hopefully see him back in the lineup at some point. And then with Hamilton, Terry Godwin, another name I had mentioned previously, who was a draft pick in the NFL in 2019. Forget which team he went to. I want to say Steelers or maybe Panthers, but he was with one of those teams at some point. Nice to see him catching on, having a larger role. Again, one of these guys, first year in the league, it might take, a couple weeks. Here we are in week 9, and he's finally kind of breaking out. So good to see him on that front. And then on defense, I feel like we never talk enough defense on this show, or at least I don't. I love, offense is my thing. I like talking about offensive players. But Simone Lawrence, not a name that I've brought up on the broadcast this year, but back when I covered Hamilton, it was Simone Lawrence everything. Him and Brandon Banks. Really, it was those two guys that I was talking about all the time, singing the praises, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Simone Lawrence in this game, this was kind of vintage, and he's getting up there in age. You're talking about, he might be in his, final season or couple seasons, whatever you want to call it. And especially just given the state of the Hamilton team, is he going to want to move forward in a rebuild? Like, who knows? The CFL is nowadays, at least, it's a short-term league where everyone is kind of on a 1-year deal. Some guys might be on 2-year deals if you're really good, but that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, really was impressed by Simone Lawrence in this game. Really good to just see him out there, kind of at full force, just given his age. And, it's just been such a long time since I feel like I've been able to, mention him in a broadcast, I guess.
Andy, how do you feel here? If you're a Ticats fan, how are we approaching this? Because they're in the bye week now, right? They're and I think I saw JC Abbott had an article. Yeah, that they're going to address the elephants in the room during the bye week. What do you make here, a Ticats fan?
Those are going to be some big elephants, and I don't think they're going to like what they see. Look, I think Jason would be the first one to tell you, our Jason, not that Jason. Our Jason would tell you that it's not happening. This Hamilton team just doesn't have it. Unfortunately, they don't have the horses. They've needed to rebuild for a while. They kept trying to push all their chips in the middle of the table. They need to blow this up. It's not happening. Taylor Powell, he's okay. He's fine. Nothing remarkable. Nothing to write home about. James Butler, I mean, I like James Butler a lot. I wish they would run the ball more. I can't believe they keep trying to make fetch happen with the pass game. It's absolutely maddening that they don't try to run the ball more, especially with Tyreek McAllister. How is this guy not getting the ball at least 10 times a game? He is explosive. I saw him come out of the end zone, and they kicked it deep, and it was in his own end zone, and he ran it out to the 30-yard line. I mean, he almost had like a equivalent of a 50-yard return out of the end zone to switch up field position. I mean, he really needs to be utilized more often. Somebody's got to get this guy the ball in his hands. So for Hamilton, it's not going to happen. And it's unfortunate because they took a big swing on Bo Levi Mitchell. It didn't work. He got hurt. He didn't play well when he was on the field. Obviously, they've had Matthew Schultz be hurt as well, which I think would have helped some of it and mitigate some of the problems. But their defense has gotten worse and worse. They gave up 422 yards to Montreal, and it's just not happening for Hamilton. I think for them, they have to take a long, hard look at a lot of the roster, and they might have to gut it. If Orlando Steinhauer is going to be able to stay around, he's going to have to gut the entire roster, which I don't know if he will at this point. If it's going to continue like this, I don't know if he's really going to be walking around these hallways much longer. So for Hamilton, Bob Young, I'm sure, is immensely disappointed. Obviously, he keeps putting in resources and money into this team, expecting to win and break their Grey Cup list streak, and it's just not happening for them this year in the East. As far as Montreal goes, yeah, Fajardo started off really rough. He threw just 2 really bad picks in the first quarter, and then he kind of got over it. But he played much better. He's not taking as many sacks. Finally, they finally kind of figured that out. That was a big issue early on. He's not taking as many as those now as the season progresses. I think the biggest takeaway here from Montreal is William Stanback. He's finally looking like himself, and that's great because we were not sure about him last year after his injury. He started to kind of slip away, but he's looked fantastic for them this season. Really happy for him, and I think that's a huge key for them going forward, just to have some sort of stability in offense, because Fajardo can't be expected to do everything, but he's played well enough and probably better in a lot of ways than he did last year with what he has. One guy that I just absolutely still love in this Montreal team is Austin Mack. His run after the catch ability is fantastic. He had a little turnaround in the first quarter, and he just ran away from a bunch of the defenders. I really like him a lot. This receiving core is really interesting. It's just kind of an amalgamation of like a bunch of random guys that all kind of get done. I mean, Tyler Snead had that huge game against Toronto and that back and forth that they had that one game a few weeks ago. And I think they have enough on offense to get it done. Obviously, they want to, I think, put more emphasis on their defense and having that be the calling card for this team. But offensively, they can just, I guess for me, their threshold is like, you can score 20 points. I think you got a good chance to win your game. So for Montreal, I can clearly see them being the second team in the East coming out and probably matching up with Toronto again, maybe in like the Eastern Conference Finals again. We'll see, but I think that's kind of what we're destined for again. This Montreal team has enough resources, whereas, the rest of the division just doesn't have it together. Ottawa, I really want Ottawa to start stepping it up again, but they're going through a lot of their own issues. So Montreal, I think, has pushed the right buttons so far this season, and they've played pretty well, even in situations where they're, offensively not getting it done, or if they just don't seem to have enough on one side of the ball, another side of the ball kind of makes up for it.
We got Tim Capper checking in here. Go Owls, go. He's got to be happy. You got to be happy. We're winning record here. I had a couple notes. They had Cote had a couple bad shanks for Alouettes. He's normally pretty reliable. Milt Stiegel was kind of calling for his head at the halftime, like, well, if you have a kicker that can't kick. I like that he was kind of a chippy game. I mean, felt kind of, felt really high stakes in that regard. Felt very, kind of divisional, right? Kind of felt that way. They had Jason Moss's keys to quarterback success. You need to be tough, smart, and accurate. That is what he says. Andy, is Cody Fajardo tough? Because they said they basically said Cody Fajardo was tough, which means he's not smart nor accurate. That was the sideline reporter. That was me. What do you make of that? Is Cody Fajardo, you need a tough, smart, accurate quarterback?
I mean, Meatloaf song is 2 out of 3 ain't bad, not 1 out of 3 ain't bad. So I guess that's not really boding well for Mr. Fajardo. But that guy does get beat up. I cannot believe he has not sustained more injuries in his career. That guy takes a licking every time he goes out there, whether he's taking a sack or not. That man just keeps getting body blows. But yeah, maybe Mr. Moss wants to rephrase that wording a little bit for his quarterback. But look, I don't know what else he's going to expect to have out of his quarterbacks besides Fajardo. Like, compared to the rest of the league, I think they're actually in pretty good standing considering what we've seen this season. I think they should be thanking their lucky stars that he's out there and he's performing at the level that he is. So for them, I mean, he still makes some boneheaded decisions, but he overall is able to make enough plays on offense for this team to be competitive in every game that they play. I haven't seen them really be out of a game. I've seen them be a little bit inefficient, sure, but I haven't really seen them be completely out of a game. I want to see them play, play teams up to the standard like Toronto, Winnipeg, BC. They're not quite in that tier yet. They're below that tier, that echelon of really, really outstanding teams in the league. So they're right below that. I'm not sure what their secret ingredient would be to get to that level. I don't think they quite have the roster for it, and I don't think they have the playmaking to really match any of those three teams. But again, like Fajardo, for what it's worth, is going to get you a certain plateau of wins and a certain floor of performance. You may not have as much of a ceiling as you would hope, but I think as far as floor goes, it's going to be better than guys like Mason Fine, guys like Taylor Powell, guys like probably Crum. I hate to say that, but Crum's still figuring out all this stuff. He has a lot of upside, but I think his floor is still a little bit low, whereas Fajardo is going to be consistent enough that he's not going to get you into a lot of trouble most of the time. Obviously, his first quarter was not good, but after that, he settled down and figured it out.
Evan, anything else on this one? We'll double time the lab. I want to get to the Chad Kelly stuff at all. I know Andy's got to head out here soon. Anything else on this one, Evan?
Yeah, I don't think so. I want to get to this Toronto game though, because that one I think might be, well, maybe the most to talk about outside of the Saskatchewan Ottawa game.
Andy, do you want to give your 2 cents on this? Because I know you got to jump off here, and then Evan and I can tackle this and then the BC game.
As far as the Toronto game goes?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I just hope Chad Kelly comes back and is all right. Like that was really unfortunate that he got hurt in this game. And obviously their offense just completely sputtered. And I have to say this, I got to eat my crow. Mike Mitchell, you were right. This team knows how to play. Calgary knows how to play Toronto. This staff knew Dinwiddie. They knew his offensive scheme. They knew his style, and they took him to the woodshed, especially after Chad Kelly got hurt. It's a real shame because I thought Toronto was going to play much better. They didn't. Calgary, I still think, has a lot to figure out. But, I mean, this was a primetime matchup for them as far as the get-right game, and they clearly took advantage of it. So, I have to give Mike Mitchell's regards. I thought Toronto was just going to straight up out talent this team and completely blow them out of the water because I just thought they had way too many resources. Clearly, there's limitations to that, especially when your star quarterback gets hurt. So there you go.
All right, Andy, appreciate it. Get to your meeting. Evan and I will talk about this. Evan, insane stat line here. Jake Mayer, the efficiency coming back here. We had the Chad Kellys of it all. What did you make of this? This was not what I was expecting. I was at a wedding following this along. Was not expecting the 20-7 victory over with Calgary.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. I think a lot of people are going to say, well, Calgary won, because Chad Kelly got hurt for Toronto. Personally, I think even if Chad Kelly stayed in that whole game, I think Calgary would have still had a pretty good shot. Not going to say they would win outright or by this much, but I think they would have definitely been in the running and probably could have pulled away because, Calgary knows how to play Toronto. Mike Mitchell was saying that, and it was just true. I mean, this was, Toronto. I mean, you want to talk about coming back down to earth. I mean, this made Calgary look. I mean, I don't even think Calgary was that impressive in this game, but it made them look extremely competitive. Like they could, run with the top guys in the league. And personally, I still don't think that. I mean, look, I'll talk about the Calgary side first, so we can get into Toronto. I'm looking at like Jake Mayer. I mean, completed 22 of 24 passes, great. but only threw for 149 yards, didn't have a touchdown. I mean, yeah, you didn't turn the ball over, but still pretty pedestrian. Like, this kind of shows me that, you were being very reserved, kind of short passes. Now, I didn't watch a ton of this game outside of the first quarter, but I will say, Dedrick Mills, we had talked about him at the top of the season a bit, as kind of one of the, bigger names. I mean, he was the one who really carried the offense in this game more than anybody. I mean, yeah, like, there were a couple guys being worked in the receiving core, like Tommy Lee Lewis, obviously, who we've talked about too. But, like, nobody really had an impressive game on the stat sheet in that department. I mean, outside of Dedrick Mills, like, Jake Mayer didn't really have to do a lot, is what I'm really trying to get at here. And I don't know. Outside of that, I really don't think there's much to say for Calgary. They just kind of, got the job done. That's all. It didn't take a lot for them to pull away in this one. Again, once the Kelly injury set in, and I mean, just all around a really slow day for Toronto too. I mean, outside of the most beautiful play, in my opinion, of probably the whole CFL weekend was that Cam Phillips touchdown. That was it was gorgeous. I mean, yeah, I'm biased. I get it. I watched Cam Phillips in 2020, whatever. But I mean, come on, like, how can you not like that? I mean, that was vintage right there. I say vintage Cam Phillips, even though it was only like 3 years ago that he was doing that stuff. But hey, I mean, it feels like a long time with the way the world's been, and how so many different careers have branched off for certain guys. But no, I think the big elephant in the room here is Chad Kelly. I mean, we can't, talk about this game without talking about what happened to him. I actually didn't get to see his injury, but clearly it was enough to where they, kept him out of the game. And I think the more surprising part was that they put Cam Dukes in the game over Brian Scott. Now, we'll get into the, my new endeavors later, but it's been known that Cameron Dukes, used to play for the Vegas Nighthawks, and that springboarded his opportunity to the CFL. Cam has been very good in short yardage this year. There's no doubt about that. But I was just kind of surprised to see him. Like, I just don't know if he was ready for this type of, opportunity where he had to come into a game and start throwing the ball. Now, I wish things were different. I wish Cam went out there and threw for, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, whatever. But, the reality is there's going to be some growing pains. And I think Naylor was the one who said, the one thing nobody talked about during the preseason was, who's behind Chad Kelly. It was Cam Dukes and Brian Scott. And then, the other guy they had was Reed's best friend, Ben Holmes, but that didn't work out either. So, yeah, no one really talked about that. And then in this game, I think there were a lot of fans like, oh, who's this Cam Dukes guy? We've only, seen him on short yardage a couple plays this season. I was surprised that they didn't put Brian Scott in. I don't know if it was just, maybe Dukes has done a bit more for them. Maybe he's more I don't know. Like, again, Brian's a great guy. I'll pull for him any day. And I thought this was his chance, but, maybe right now there's just other things they want to see, and they wanted to give Cam his fair shot. And that's great. Like, he really deserves it. I mean, Cam has had a pretty quick, rise to the top here. And to see a guy, from the NAIA level, who went through indoor football to get to the CFL and is throwing passes. I mean, that's a story I really want to hear about. I don't care if, he threw a pick or whatever, only completed half of his passes. Like, I think, his rise here is pretty impressive. And that was my positive takeaway from this game. Because, like, if you're Toronto, I mean, you're walking away from this one thinking, geez, we were on top of the world. Now things are kind of, coming crashing down. And obviously, I mean, look, Toronto's fine. They're in a fine position. This isn't saying their season's over or anything like that. But it just, I think we can use the term humbled here. They got humbled real quick. And that's the way the game is this time. Now, for Calgary, they absolutely needed this win. I mean, if you're losing this game, regardless of whether Chad Kelly's healthy or not, I mean, you're sitting at 2-6. And by that point, Saskatchewan, I mean, I was saying earlier, they kind of control their own destiny. But like hell, I mean, Saskatchewan would have been in a really nice spot had Calgary, lost this weekend, sitting there at 500, and they got their win against Ottawa. So, yeah, I mean, then it kind of becomes a numbers game. But all around, I think that's what made this game interesting. It wasn't necessarily the play for some of it. I mean, my obviously strong point is talking about players. But for this one, it was really more about, standings and kind of, like, where guys are and what this means long term, if that makes sense.
No, totally. Like you said, I have the standings here. Like, yeah, if you're Calgary here and you're 2-6, it's terrifying here. Especially in the West with everything. A couple things, and then we'll pull the Band-Aid off here and talk about BC. This was interesting. I had saved, and like you said, the stat line can be misleading because it was only for what was it? How many yards was it? For 149 yards. But Jake Maier had the fourth highest completion rating in CFL history.
Wow.
Insane. With Ricky
okay, well, I didn't know that. I mean, hell, honestly, that by itself, I will say, like, yeah, I think people are going to focus more on the yards, but completing 22 passes is not easy. And if you're only throwing 24 of them, yeah, like it doesn't, I don't want to say the yards don't matter, but like I can't discredit Jake Maier. Again, I've gone on record being a huge Jake Maier fan. So if anything, I'm going to support the guy here and root for him. And it's nice to see Nathan Rourke on that list too, I will say. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if that was the game I was at where he went 34-37, but I remember he had a pretty high completion percentage when I was there last year in Edmonton. And the last thing I'll bring up about this game actually has to do with next week, because I'll be seeing Calgary live next week in BC. So looking forward to that. And again, maybe that's why I also found this game more interesting and probably why I was paying more attention, kind of like, what should I expect going into next week's game?
Yeah, no, this is anytime we see Nathan Rourke on the list, we still exist, Nathan. CFL still here if you want to talk to us. The other thing, looking at the schedule here, Winnipeg or what is it? Toronto here. If you want to have a bounce back, I think here, Ottawa, at Toronto, I think that'll be good. I think that's going to be rowdy. They're going to be motivated with all that. Hopefully you have a motivated BC team here coming into that. I guess we need to rip the Band-Aid off here. Are we ready to talk about this BC Lions game?
Reed, I'm ready. I just don't know if you are.
Yeah, so this was, I think this happened last year too, and I need to stop doing these. It was it was the game where Nathan Rourke got hurt, and I think we did the same thing. I think we did like a pregame. I'm like, oh, this is the big like Thursday night, like we're getting all excited, and then I get Dorothy. We go sit downstairs, and that was the game when Nathan Rourke got hurt, and we didn't know at the time, at the time, like that doesn't look very good. Ended up being very poor. Let's get into this. I had tweeted, and I had many angry tweets. I'll pull up. I needed Evan, my director therapist here of this. I just don't. I'm fine being a fan, because I'm not the Danny Austins of the world. Danny. I'm a reporter. Like I don't cheer for my team. I cheer. I'm a fan. I just don't want to be embarrassed. And having Winnipeg put up 50 points against BC, I finally had my split screen, and the Mariners took priority because at least we came back and won with a grand slam. Cade Marlowe in the top of the ninth here to win that one. But this was a terrible, no good, very bad game. Evan, what did you make of this one?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and there's also not much to talk about, depending on which side you want to take. I remember I was out with Andy a couple days ago, and he was saying, I think Winnipeg's gonna, beat the brakes off BC. He definitely said they were gonna beat him, and Reed, I agreed with that statement just because, I feel like, BC was kind of due for one of these games. Now, maybe I don't know, like they went from, they went from pitching a shutout to giving up 50 points. So maybe I wasn't expecting that part of it, but they were due for a game like this. And I say that because, the reality is, they've been a good team. They've been a really good team. They've been holding momentum for a long time. But every team kind of has this, and you can just sense like, okay, like at some point, like, things are going to give out. Look at Toronto. As I said before, like, Chad Kelly, whether he gets hurt or not, maybe doesn't matter because Calgary has them, figured out probably more than maybe any other team in the league at this point. But yeah, ultimately, I'll start with the Winnipeg side, the more positive side of this game. Well, at least if you're a Winnipeg fan, so I was really impressed. Look, everyone's going to talk about Zach Collaros, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns, but we're used to that at this point. That's like just a good Zach Collaros performance. Like, I don't really think you need to discuss that much, further. And even Drew Brown came in 2 of 2, 78 yards and a touchdown.
We saw Drew Brown. When do you ever see Drew Brown?
I know, like Drew Brown, another like, short yardage kind of guy. Like you don't really hear about him. And not a player I'm extremely familiar with. I think he was at Hawaii and then Oklahoma State, something like that. But then, what I really want to talk about here is the run game, because as weird as it sounds, I mean, they had like even Dakota Prukop had 2 carries for 21 yards in this game. Like they just had, I mean, if you look like they had, Brady Oliveira, their top rusher, averaged 7.4 yards per carry, had 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, again, only on 9 carries, but still extremely efficient. And then you had 2 guys below that, Nick Dembski and Dakota Prukop. Like I said, both those guys averaged over 10 yards a carry. Only 2 carries, but hey, like, those are still, big runs in themselves. And then, you had a couple guys after that, nothing too much. Greg McCrae maybe had, a couple, 1 11-yard run, it looks like. Then you get to the receiving core, and this is where it just explodes. I mean, I don't know if I had mentioned Kenny Lawler at all on this show prior to now, or maybe prior to last week, but Kenny Lawler, I mean, has immediately come in. And if you thought that this offense already wasn't explosive, I mean, Kenny Lawler was just the icing on the cake. Not that they even needed him, but my God, I mean, this guy, I honestly thought he might have lost a step and it was going to take him maybe a month to get up to speed. Clearly not. Clearly the pre-existing connection is still there. This is where he wants to be. I mean, that was a phenomenal. I mean, 200 receiving yards in a game on 7 catches. I mean, that does not happen very often. And, that I don't, man, just hats off to Kenny Lawler. I won't, salivate over him for too long. But, Dalton Schoen, another one, he was extremely good last year. Dalton Schoen was kind of, everyone talked about Nathan Rourke last year, but Dalton Schoen was kind of another, breakout star. Still doing it here in year 2. And then, you had a deep Rasheed Bailey touchdown. Shout out to Rasheed Bailey, man. That guy's been doing it for I don't know how long. He was a Division III guy too, and he's crafted. I mean, he's probably making like, so rare to see a guy from that level, have like a long pro football career. But the reality is that can happen in the CFL. I mean, Jake Serezna is another D3 player up in this league, and those guys are killing it. So shout out to, Rasheed Bailey, any D3 players up in Canada, really. Looking at the defense, I don't know. I mean, their defense, they only gave up 14 points, but I don't really think there were any players that stood out too much. I mean, Demario Houston had an interception, and Demario Houston has been a very kind of steady contributor, I think, for that Bombers D. But now I'll get into the BC side of things, the not so great side of things. I won't be too critical here because, again, like I said, I think this game was just kind of bound to happen at one point. And again, BC, the reality is like without Vernon, I mean, they're dealing with some issues. It's not like they're still a good team, but they're not exactly complete right now. So Dane Evans, we had talked about Dane Evans last week. I said, he had a very solid performance, would definitely take him again. But then Dane Evans has these things where you say that, and then the next week he goes out and you're like, okay, well, maybe I need to take my word back on that. Now, again, I still think Dane's a good quarterback. I would take him over Mason Fine. But yeah, this one just, it really left a lot to be desired. And, Dane, I think this is the reality as to why he's not starting in the CFL, just because there's so much inconsistency. Now, again, it doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback. That's something he can easily work on. And it's hard when you're not getting game reps all the time. Like it took the Vernon injury for BC to even consider playing him because Vernon was playing so well. And we had talked prior to the season, it was like, I mean, there was a time where, Dane Evans and Vernon, like, I think that battle was closer than a lot of us maybe expected or, how it turned out, whatever. And then you had Dom Davis come in, and Dom Davis went 8 of 18 for 76 yards. Not a whole lot better. Like, yeah, he didn't throw any interceptions, but I mean, he didn't necessarily complete a lot of passes. And I don't know. One of those games where you just kind of feel defeated. You don't really know what to do. The receiving core, they did what they could. I'll say that. It definitely wasn't a great day for them just because, I mean, the quarterbacks were only throwing for so many yards. But, it was – I mean, what are you going to expect, right? Like it's when you're down, I mean, when you're giving up 50 points. And then the BC defense, well, there's not a whole lot to say. Baseko Lacombo was good in this game. Despite the team giving up 50 points, he had a nice outing. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, just not a lot to talk about. I think this is a game, if you're BC, a fan, player, coach, whatever, on to the next one. Just on to the next one. Don't even think about this because the reality is, I mean, you are going to be running with Winnipeg for that spot probably in the Grey Cup in the West. And I've been saying that for a while now. You can't let this affect your play for the rest of the season. Like, this is a game you absolutely need to move on from immediately. It's embarrassing. It sucks. Whatever. Move on. Get on with it. It's life. That's football. I mean, you could say that about a lot of teams, but I'm saying this is really important here, this kind of ideology or whatever you want to call it, because, again, BC and Winnipeg, like those are the top two teams. Like I think those guys are going to be in the Western final, and there's not much of a question about it. It would take a huge upset for maybe Saskatchewan, which I don't see happening unless, injuries deplete a team or something, but it would take like a really big upset, for it not to be BC and Winnipeg playing in that game. And the reality is BC can beat Winnipeg. They did it earlier in the season, and it was almost the opposite of what we saw, where Winnipeg was on the side of like, we just need to forget about it. We just need to move on, get rid of it. And then Winnipeg's had a couple games like that this year. The Ottawa one, definitely a game that you get off the slate. But yeah, I think if you're BC, I mean, you just really have to, you go on to Calgary, you go on to, the rest of the slate, and you worry about this again when it's time, not, why do we play so poorly? What do we need to do better? I don't really think, obviously you need to play better. Okay. You gave up 50 points, but it's less about, them changing the strategy. I just think it's, getting back to full health. Maybe you need to recharge. Again, you needed to be humbled, just like I said about Toronto. It's about being humbled. You take a step back. You look at things at the bigger picture. I have no doubt BC is going to go out next week and beat Calgary. I don't know by how much. I'll say 10 right now. I'm going to be there at that game. So dare I say anything, too extravagant. But I think that's kind of where I stand on that game as a whole. And, a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, geez, like what happened to BC? Things were going so great. Well, they are still great. Maybe I'm biased, whatever, but I said that about Winnipeg when they lost to Ottawa. Okay, yeah, they had a bad game. So what? Winnipeg's still gonna be in Grey Cup contention. It's not the end of the world.
Well, I got a couple things here. So I had tweeted this out because back when we had lost, before I had tweeted this, not quite as McCall night, that was the July 3rd loss. So revisit that. Because like I said, I'm a fan here. You talked about not wanting to live with this too much. Hey, I'm straight up not having a good time. This is what bothered me was it's one thing if you're VA's out, Dane, we love Dane. There's a reason why there wasn't a hot market. And, I think CFL fans tend to hype like Dane, played decently last week. Oh, okay. Like Dane's here and we have that, or you could trade Dane and he could go to, Ottawa or come back. Dane Evans is still Dane Evans. We know at this point, but my problem with this was our defense was just atrocious. I don't care if Dane, throws 2 of 15 and gets sacked and this is Ryan Phillips' defense, and these guys were just wide open running down the field. When BC, when they won the toss, opted to keep the ball at the beginning, I said, you better score right now. They didn't. Winnipeg came out where I said, right, 2 completions, they're down the field scoring. I'm like, oh my God, like we are in for a nightmare here. And the last thing, I don't want to play this, but Rick kind of addressed the room and he said what you said, like, we need to move on. Don't take anything away from this. And I don't like that mentality. I don't like that mentality in baseball where it's, there's 500 games and we lost. And I think you need to take away. And I understand that Winnipeg was coming off the bye and they were able to game prep for a week and a half for this. BC had just played and they were a short week and traveling in, but something was wrong there. I don't know if the defense is tired, but I did not like that. The kind of this hallmark, trademark of the BC Lions here as their defense and giving up that much. I just thought it was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're definitely not using the Donut Boys nickname this week. That's all.
Definitely not. Yeah, what happened to the Donut Boys? Thank you.
Yeah, well, quite the opposite. I mean, they had the score on the other end finished with a 0. There was just a 5 in front of it this time. Yeah. Maybe 5 donuts. I don't know. We're joking.
Anyway, we'll get out of here soon. Not good. BC, like I said, looking to bounce back with Calgary. Evan had exciting news we talked at the top. Anything else you want to share about that now before we get out of here? Your new director position.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about it briefly. Just go over some things that maybe I didn't initially say in my tweet or announcement, whatever you want to call it. Yep, I got position assistant director of player personnel for the Vegas Nighthawks. This type of thing, personnel related, has been in the works for a couple months now. I've definitely, I'm trying to transition a bit, I think, out of media. Not that that doesn't mean I'm giving up anything right away. Don't get too excited. Right after I put out this tweet, I said, look, before anybody says anything, this doesn't stop my XFL coverage, doesn't stop anything else I'm currently doing. it might shift some things. I'm going to be putting more time into different things now, and this is going to keep me extremely busy through the next year. We got to start building the team pretty soon. IFL season starts in March. But yes, so just to clarify some things, this is a remote position. All right, I'm working in school. I'm going to be out in Vegas at some point, but I'm not living out there while I'm building this roster. This is all done, through databases and just remote virtual work and things like that. I'm not going to go into too many details, but yeah, man, I mean, I'm really excited. Again, this was something in the works for many months. And, I think I've always had a great knowledge of players. That has been my one thing that I think has separated me from certain people in this space. And, having the opportunity to get players together and build a team. I mean, I think this is what a lot of people dream about. I mean, if you're a kid and you're playing Madden and you're building your franchise, on the Madden game, I'm doing this, but it's in real life. And, I don't really care what league it is. I mean, this is just, I was out in Vegas at the IFL XFL Combine, and I won't go too much into that either because I've already talked about that a bit. But, I think, I was out there and, just kind of finalized everything. I talked to a couple teams about this sort of thing. I believe it or not, I was talking to some CFL people at one point. I won't name names or teams, but, I was talking to some guys in the CFL and kind of maybe I realized I wanted to step down a bit and, just kind of have a, position with a different league where I could, maybe do more, because the reality is, like, right now I have the title of assistant director of player personnel. In the CFL, I probably would have just been a regular scout, which is fine, but the opportunity really wasn't there anyway. So this is going to be awesome, man. I'm really looking forward to this. And, again, there might be some things, that I have to, keep quiet about nowadays and whatever. But I mean, yeah, it's time to get to work. Like I was saying earlier, if I wasn't working hard before this, I'm definitely going to be working hard now. So this next year, while it's going to be fun, I'm putting my head down and we're really doing a proper evaluation of a lot of things, I guess.
Well, like I said at the top, it's exciting. I think it's cool that, people, and this is all these leagues, CFL, XFL, USFL, it's guys and girls covering this, that are passionate about it. That's why we choose to do it. And it's cool to see, people that want to take a step into this. And that's always kind of been your interest to be able to transition. So I think that's exciting. Obviously, we're all super excited for that and anything you need to do, but that's great. Like I said, you couldn't say enough how proud and everyone is, and just kind of seeing, what it's been 2-3 years of this, journey of kind of all of us on together in our group. And so we're very excited for that. I will get out because I'm sure Evan's got stuff to do as well. Go scout players. Big week here. I think we have Elks to the slaughter. Hopefully, I don't see that would be the story if the Elks reverse what would it be, 22 game losing streak on that. But it's exciting. It's an exciting week. We'll see. Anything else, Evan, before we get out? I got to figure out what we're doing. I don't think the Elks Winnipeg deserves the pregame show this week like the Elks Bombers did last week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely looking forward to the Calgary BC game because I'll be there. And I don't know if it's the most intriguing matchup of the week. I'm definitely interested to see how BC bounces back, I think, is the key thing over everything. Really the game I'm looking at, I know you had mentioned Ottawa, Toronto, but honestly, I think Saskatchewan, Montreal is kind of one of these underrated ones that might slip under the radar. Just given, Saskatchewan kind of finally pulled through this week, and we'll see. I feel like either this is going to be a really close game or one of these teams is going to pull away early. I think that's kind of my take on that, but definitely one I'll be having my eye on, out of that slate.
Pat has a funny comment here. Yeah, because we have Trey Ford now getting to play. I think Morley Scott reported he's going to be starting. Trey Ford going to go 4 TDs. He'll have a Dakota Brewcott Masterclass taking the victory away from it. Yeah, this is a Trey Ford season here. Hashtag free Trey Ford, Justin Duncan, all of that. Really appreciate it, Evan. It should be a good week. Like I said, like and subscribe. We'll figure out what we're doing. I got some emails to send here, but that'll be it for me and Mr. Director here. We'll check it that time. And I hope Jason feels better. I think thoughts and prayers, yeah. Jason, with his, under the weather. So I'm sure he will bounce back, but maybe just a poor Ticats performance. So anyway, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.